A lot of things about the comic industry have not really changed in the last 25 years or so. Now, there'll be some people who disagree. They see the changes at micro levels, but put it this way, and I've talked to many retailers who agree. If you ran a comic shop in the 90s and then you took a complete break from it and you came back into it in 2019, we won't count this year, um, a lot was very familiar to you. Why is that? Why isn't innovation driving harder and faster in this business that at its core is entertainment and media? Hey, everybody, this is Perch. Um, I think that, I was on a show a couple nights ago about kind of retailers, and we were listening to Brian Hibbs talk about his complaints with DC doing these alternate plans for distribution. And it awakened a thought that I've had a lot, which is the comic industry really isn't evolving. It's in a sense of arrested development where it is the same as it's been for a long time. And to make matters worse, most people are they dig in their heels and want to keep it that way. Whenever there's been a disruptor or a big change, a lot of retailers will line up, and not when I say a lot, I don't mean the majority. I mean kind of the loud minority. Uh, they will line up and immediately start complaining. They will start saying, why are we doing this? No, it's going to ruin our business. The worst thing that could ever be done. It's always the same kind of arguments, the same kind of thing that Hibbs said in his post on Facebook of if they wanted to spit in the eye of retailers, this is how they do it. They've destroyed my reputation forever. I'm tempted to not order DC or Marvel ever again. And first of all, any retailer that tells you that is blowing smoke. First of all, even if their business is very much aligned to, not the new monthly comics, the idea of saying I'm going to boycott DC, it's just a silly kind of statement. It's just as silly as when people on Twitter say, they hired this writer or that writer, or this person was mean on social media, therefore boycott all Marvel. The retailer should boycott Marvel. It's just ludicrous. It's a silly statement, but it's indicative of a business that really doesn't want to change. And it's not uncommon that I mentioned at the beginning. I had a pause in having a comic shop. Several years, and I was going through the Capital City world, and then I went to the Diamond world because Capital City, of course, vanished, and then there was a big pause. And when I came back to Diamond, what astounded me was that nothing had changed. And this is, in the 90s, early 2000s, the biggest shock of all was that the printer, the forms, the invoice, thank you, that was in the box. I remember looking at that and going, I think this is dot matrix paper. And for those of you who aren't old, this was paper that had two things that tore off the sides, off the left and the right, and had little holes in it, and they ran through a wheel. That's how printers used to work. And he had this dot matrix. Now, if you ever watch any movies that are talking about the computers in the 80s, you'll hear this. They use a lot of sound effects and things. But anyway, the invoice was always on this dot matrix paper in the 90s. And then 10 years later, I remember getting it. It's good Lord, where are they even finding this paper now? I don't even know where this is coming from. Eventually that did change, but it's like the Holdouts. I kept expecting to go into the box and there'd be some sign up for AOL discs in there. It had this feeling of, hey, if you are a loyal Diamond customer for 10 years, we'll give you this $25 Blockbuster video card. It had that feeling of this needs a good kick in the butt to get moving again. But it didn't happen. And a good reason why it didn't happen is anytime someone wanted to do some innovation or some change or, evolve things forward, there'd be this giant kind of chorus of, nope, not in my town. You can't do that to me. And you have to get my buy-in. And there's, this dispersed network of hundreds of retailers who all, the specter was that these hundreds of retailers all needed to be assembled in some kind of James Bond council where they're all sitting in shadows up in the stands and they're voting on things, and it's the Council of Elders has declared we will be able to sell comics on Tuesdays, and this kind of strange behavior. Um, but but again, I want to be fair here. Most retailers, the vast majority of retailers, are not like this. This is abnormal. This is not how things normally are, and it's a couple loud people that make these comments, and that's just kind of what we've all had to live with. But the weird part is that it's we're now 2020, and I think the eye-opening part, and this is where I think in the next year you're going to see a bunch of very kind of not a civil war exactly, but you're going to see some major changes finally happen in comics, because what has happened is we had a lot of people who are complaining and criticizing and resistance to any change, whether it's price increases or different ways of ordering. What was weird is that a lot of retailers were against the variant schemes, and then as years went by, it's almost like Stockholm syndrome. I've heard retailers kind of now start to give the like, you can't take that away from us. It's like, whoa, what, where did this come from? But it is it now we are in 2020. No comics can be distributed. There is no new comic Wednesday. Things have shut down, and you still have some retailers out there going, nope, no changes allowed. I will sit and wait for Diamond. And it's like, I don't know, I'm using that accent there, but it's like, okay, at this point, you're crazy. At this point, you're just going to block anything, even if it means we all go out of business. I mean, it was kind of like the complaints. One of the complaints was, you can't sell if my shop is shut down in California, it's not fair for you to shut down for you to sell comics in Wyoming, even if Wyoming is open for business and people are going about their day and I'm in a lockdown. Nope, if one of us is shut down, we're all shut down. It's just weird. It make nobody in their right mind would go for that, but comics has it. And it's not uncommon. A lot of small business networks have these kinds of strange fiefdoms and weird blocks to change. But change is inevitable in all things, and the businesses that get ruined are when there is no change, when people resist it to the point of extinction because they refuse to give up ground that they don't actually have. And that's what a lot of this is. A lot of the complaining that happens at the retailer level is people who are, I'm not ceding any authority. Well, you don't have any authority. You don't. Your power is eroding out from under you. So you've got to get with the times. You got to move. Now, for the third time, I'm going to just say the vast majority of comic retailers are not this way. They're just trying to run their business. They're trying to survive. And if you gave them a good business model, they will take it. And if you give them a disruptive business model, but they see how they can make money, they will take it. They're not going to just immediately have this gut reaction of no. But there are a couple loud retailers who are resistant to any change whatsoever. But that time, in all businesses, there becomes disruptive pressure and then disruptive force. Disruptive pressure is where everybody kind of knows that change needs to happen, but nobody's making that move because for economical reasons, or just the supply chain isn't quite worked out, or just for one reason or another somebody's blocking. And so that's the arrested development. That's where the pressure builds and builds and builds. And then disruptive force is when something happens that just pushes. For example, when digital for movie distribution got going, when Netflix as a streaming service came out and got very popular, and then you had this stuff, and you had Blockbuster and all these video shops close in a year, because it just suddenly everybody knew that model needed to change, but finally there was a viable alternative, and you had disruptive force, and change happened. Well, we're kind of there right now with comics. The disruptive force being the virus and the aftermath of what happens after the virus. I mean, what's weird is I've talked to some retailers who are just hoping for this DC plan with Lunar and UCB. I don't have that acronym. That acronym's not from Midtown and Discount Comic Book Service. You have a lot of pressure, from some retailers, a small group, who want that to fail very, very badly. They're just hoping that falls on its face. They don't get the comics out. Nobody orders it. It sinks. And then we're back to Diamond. That's what some retailers are hoping for. The problem is that will almost definitely doom the comic industry. putting things back into the box, just going back, after, unfortunately, it's kind of like the wizard behind the old man behind the curtain in the Wizard of Oz. The curtain has been pulled back, and we see now the impact of single source distribution. We see how thin the margins were at Diamond and how cash flow strapped they were. We see what not having other distribution and other sources has led to us, and we see what a lack of a digital strategy has done. And so you can't now suddenly say, well, let's say Midtown and discount comic book service completely fail. Okay, great, we're back to Diamond and everything's back to normal. And come September, you're going in on a Wednesday and you're getting the variant cover for X Corp's #4 and the third, Iron Man 2021 Prelude or whatever the hell it is. You can't just, those days are not going to return because everybody's seen behind the curtain. Everybody's seen what happens when disaster strikes. And now the only people who are going to be able to live with that are people who are adept at burying their head in the sand. And people who bury their head in the sands are not people who can survive from a business perspective. So change is coming. So right now we're sorting out, who's going to drive that change and who's going to get driven over by that change. And that's where things sit. But it's an interesting business. I mean, retailers, they tend to be traditional. They tend to be love of the comic first, business minded second in some cases, and we're seeing some of that impact. But it's a curious state. Where do you fall in all this? And I'm going to keep talking about changes in the industry and kind of the factors around it. Why it's so hard for people, the psychology. It's interesting. But leave your comments below. Love to know what you think about the matter. Like, subscribe, introduce the channel to a friend. That would be much appreciated. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch, and thank you for listening.